introduce our speaker today. Again, I'm Kathleen O'Donnell, our co-director of programs, and I'm really happy to introduce Margie Meacham as our guest speaker today. Margie is a brain lady, so we really like that. So she's a member of Brain Ladies, a founding member, I think, a consortium of leading experts in applied cognitive science. So we're going to see how some of that works today. And she's working at this really interesting intersection of neuroscience and AI, or artificial intelligence. So the real stuff, you know, human stuff and artificial intelligence. So she's a real recognized leader in this area, how to apply these disciplines to learning and performance. She's a keynote speaker, a recognized innovator, and I think as you'll see, she's darn fun and engaging. So, and as I mentioned, she's going to be doing that workshop with us on October 16th. So you'll be getting some information on that. So with that, welcome, Margie.
Kathy, I'm so happy to be here, and I really appreciate the people.
We can't quite hear you as well as we did before.
Oh, I think I hit that again. I'm very bad about that. Just tell me if you can't hear me. All right.
You're good.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming, especially for taking their lunch hour, or I know we sometimes have people from all over the world, so they could be somewhere else. So what I'm going to do is you don't need to be looking at me, but I thought I'd take a minute and let you see what I look like. I want to go through some slides with you, but we're also going to be talking a lot together. So it's going to be more of a conversation. I'd like you to put things in the chat if you need to or want to. And you should be seeing my slides. Can somebody tell me if that's right? I tested it and I did it right. Not just yet.
Yeah.
Let me try that again.
It looks like it's going there.
Yeah. And then when I switch,
I think we're seeing the screen. There we go. There we go.
We're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we are. Okay. So, as you know, this is AI and talent development that we're talking about, and what you can do today. And we were talking about this before the program started, that we may not even realize at times that we're working with an artificial intelligence. They become so seamlessly integrated into our digital lives these days. And yet we're not doing as much in the learning profession as we'd like to. And that's what I discovered when I did the research for my latest book, AI and Talent Development, which Kathy mentioned. You'll hear more about that later. And you know what, guys? I realized that since I cannot see the chat, you will have to prompt me when there's a question you want me to stop for.
No problem.
So let me tell you a little bit about what I do. So what does it mean, the intersection of brain science and artificial intelligence? Well, an interesting thing started happening about 10 years ago. And I was entirely focused on neuroscience, and the exciting things coming out that finally we understood how our brains work. And that changes some of the decisions you make. That changes how we do things. And that's still the primary focus of what I do. But I started noticing that neuroscientists were using artificial intelligence to help them uncover the mysteries of the brain. You know, it has 100 billion cells. That's as many stars as there are in the Milky Way. It's the most complex thing we know. And it's kind of ironic, but it's actually a little bit more than our own brains can understand. So a brain that can't quite understand itself is a real interesting conundrum, but that's where artificial intelligence comes in. Now, the more that the artificial intelligence folks started helping the neuroscientists, the more they began to realize, hey, we're both studying neural networks. Let's collaborate. And that is, in fact, what's been happening is these two disciplines are really, convergence is probably too strong a word, but they are certainly aware of each other, sharing information, and very often the papers that are coming out in the peer-reviewed journals have a neuroscientist and an artificial intelligence specialist working together. So what do? I translate that into the things we're all doing. And I'm a big fan. You guys probably recognize Gagne's 9 events of instructions. That's how I do it. I link that information to the process of learning and how we can make that happen. And what I'm here to talk with you today about is artificial intelligence And as soon as you hear that, you probably think of things like Commander Data. If you go back even farther, maybe HAL, the really scary artificial intelligence in 2001. And those things are not real. So those things are not happening anytime soon. But you might have interacted with an artificial intelligence before. Has anybody done so? And guys, let me know if anyone in the chat says, yes, I know I've interacted with an artificial intelligence.
I have somebody said yes. A couple people have said yes. I know I have, Margie. This is Kathy. So a couple of people saying yes. Yes, yes.
Yeah. And here's what you may have been aware of. Online banking or even your streaming services. There's a lot of algorithms determining what Netflix and Hulu and other services are going to offer you. And the last year of spending more time at home has given them tons of data on our preferences and our behaviors. Your smartphone has a certain level of intelligence and will recommend things. Alexa, Cortana, all of those kind of services, Google. You may have contacted a customer service department and been offered a chat, and very likely that was not a human being behind that chat. It was something we're going to talk about called a chatbot. And Amazon uses artificial intelligence to predict what you're going to order before you order it to make sure that they have it in stock. So you actually all are probably more experienced than you realize if you think about some of those things that you do every day. So wouldn't it be something if our learning programs could feel a little more like that? So it's important to establish that on the left, we have the general intelligence definition. That's the stuff of science fiction movies and TV shows where you basically recreate a human being, a walking, talking human being that reacts the same way we do. Some futurists say we're closer than we think, but most people say, oh, we're really far away from that. But what we have today is we have what people in the field will call machines. They're very often just programs. They can be a machine like a robot, or they could be just a program that operates on a screen. And they can do a narrow range of tasks as well or better than a human being without having to be told what steps to take. They have taught themselves what they need to do. And they do this primarily by recognizing patterns, much the same way that our brain learns, particularly when we're younger, and we start to be able to recognize that the world behaves in predictable ways. And so we can take that and start to make decisions on how we're going to act, how we're going to engage with other people or other things in our environment. And we are teaching these programs how to do that. And as we said, it really is part of our everyday life. So very quick, brief history of AI. It starts way back in 1950, and some people would trace back even earlier. Even the ancient Greeks speculated that we might be able to create an artificial human being. But it was really Alan Turing who suggested what's become the Turing test. If we could build a bot that could fool 50% of the people, we can consider it intelligent because we can't tell the difference. And some people think that happened in 2006 on Jeopardy. Other people think it happened when Siri came out in 2010 or in 2015, or maybe it was 2016 at Georgia Tech when a computer science professor created a teaching assistant that you could communicate with by email that was really a program. It was an AI named Jill, and at the beginning, the students absolutely hated her because she didn't know much. She was always saying, I don't know, I'll get back to you. But you know what? She gets smarter and smarter because that's what she was built to do. And by the end of the term, not one student suspected that she was artificial, and they nominated her for an award for the best teaching assistant. So that's quite an achievement. And they still, at Georgia Tech, you can take a class that you know you're going to have Jill Watson as your TA. So they continue to build on that. Now the surprise is out of it, of course, but it's still quite a big deal. And maybe you sometime next year, this is a perfect time for you to be planning to incorporate some intelligence into your program for next year, or even towards the end of this year. And the best place to start, and the one I'm going to focus on, is a chatbot. And I'll tell you, there are many reasons why, but one of the biggest reasons why is because they're pretty easy to get into. A chatbot is a program that simulates conversations with human users, especially over the internet, or it could be behind your firewall on your intranet. And notice I really emphasize that word simulate, because it's only within the narrow range that you build the bot for. You build it for a particular type of conversation, and you give it access to certain information, and that's what it can talk about. And I'll show you a few examples. And in addition to simulating that experience, the chatbot can capture what the user says back, or what questions are being asked most often. It can provide more information or a link or a video, and it can really provide a customized learning experience that is unique to every user every time they visit it. So why are they so exciting? Well, you can get instant answers. None of us can be online 24/7, although some of us may feel like we almost are in today's environment. It allows people to take training outside of their official working hours. A chatbot's available 24/7, and most of them have a virtually unlimited number of users who could be engaging with that same chatbot with different conversations at the same time. And what's really neat is that it learns the preferences of individuals. So for example, if you like to be called by your nickname, I like to be called Margie. My legal name, my formal name is Marjorie. And even as a little girl, nobody called me that. So, you know, that's one of the first things a chatbot can say is, what name would you like me to use? Just like you would if you were meeting someone for the first time. It remembers that, it recognizes by the user ID, oh, here comes John or Joe or Mary Beth. So it also recognizes how formal or informal the user communicates with them and can adjust the tone that it uses back. So just like humans do. If we're speaking with someone who seems quite formal, we probably pick up on that hint and follow through very much the same way. Here's what's happening inside your brain when you're interacting with a chatbot. First of all, your brain cannot tell the difference. It feels like you're having, and I put real in quotes, a conversation with another sentient being. It's very social. It actually stimulates the reward circuit in the brain, and I'll show you that a little later, that happens when we engage with each other. That's one reason why we can connect virtually and still feel connected. So even in the trying times that we had in the past year, we were able to stay connected to a great extent because of our brain's power to recognize that there's more than one way to have a social connection with someone. And I'm sure you all recognize the Socratic method of asking questions to help people learn. And this is another thing chatbots are great for. It's that give and take that's very hard to build in traditional e-learning. And even in virtual training, it's very hard to have it on an individual level. We have to communicate one to many, and that sometimes leaves some people out. The other thing that's happening at the same time is that because this is a different way of communicating, immediately the attention centers in the brain start to wake up, and you use more neural pathways to remember that conversation and that engagement. What did the chatbot ask you? What did it say? What links did it share with you? And so that learning tends to be deeper and retained longer. And I already mentioned the power of personalization. And it can be a great break from hours and hours of teaching by Zoom or death by PowerPoint that people can take in their own time, relax, sitting when they want to take it. And it's just one more tool in your toolbox. So I don't mean to say you should quickly, dump everything else you have and start building chatbots, because that's one of the dangers when you get a new technology is sometimes people overdo it and think that's the only way to go. But certainly there are great benefits for introducing it. And one of the greatest benefits is the human reward circuit. So there are pathways we know in the brain where chemicals that stimulate different feelings and different ways of thinking are released when you do things that the brain recognizes as positive. Now, this judgment of what's positive is hardwired by genetics. We have evolved, for example, to get rewarded when we are physically active or when we have a lot of sensory stimulation, like being out in the sunlight or taking a walk or watching an exciting movie. Well, those kind of things kept us alive as a species as we were evolving and competing with stronger, faster, scarier, maybe even smarter species than us. It was this ability, this reward system kept saying, that's a good thing, keep doing it. Learning is one of those behaviors that we get rewarded for. It feels good. We get a chemical that makes us feel good. And so one of the things that happens with the chatbot is it is stimulating that reward system because you're talking to it. You feel that it's a communication, so you get that bump. Then it makes you think, and that back and forth makes you further stimulated. Now, in the red, you'll notice that some people, again, probably genetically disposed for this, can actually take things too far and become addicted. And we see a certain amount of this of people who are more or less addicted to their phones. That's because that reward circuit keeps firing and they start to get dependent on it, like they physically need it. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the general healthy reward stimulation that happens to all of us. Now, here's a few examples of chatbots. And let me just stop and catch my breath and see if what I did so far has brought us any questions in the chat, because I know I kind of have a tendency to rattle on sometimes.
No, we have nothing. We
Yeah,
are
Okay.
rapt attention.
I'm always good for one though, Margie. I'm kind of curious about, are there limitations or specific guidelines to determine what's a good application for a chatbot?
Yes, there are, and hold that thought.
Okay,
and we're going to cover that in a little bit. That's a great question. So here's a couple of examples. This one happens to be Amtrak. And instead of having a person that you call and you wait on hold probably to get someone available, you have this simulated conversation. And notice that they gave you this picture of a person and they tried to make you feel like there's a real person and you're going to book tickets. In a little bit, I'm going to show you a live chatbot. These are just screenshots right now. This one I love because it's just a fun use of it. This is a balloon ride. So they show you a little video of what it could be like, what's the experience like being up there high. And then they have different themes for how they schedule the flights. So you can select from these options and then they'll give you ideas. So if you want to make it really special with an anniversary, they might say, well, we can have flowers and champagne or chocolates. What would make it special to you and your partner? So that's a fun one. This one, I worked with the CDC on this one, and this is Dot, and she's still up and running. She answers questions about the COVID-19. Whoops, went too fast, the COVID-19 virus. And so you get, and they've probably changed by now because this was back in April when I took the screenshot. So Dot tells them what current questions she's being asked the most, and those bubble up to the top of the list. And then when you click on those, she asks you a few more questions and then can give you information. So if someone wants the latest update on the information, it goes right to the CDC's live database. So the answer is the most current possible. So that's more of an example of something you might use in a talent development or performance support situation. Now I'm going to, and we tested this and it worked great, so you know how that goes. I'm going to show you a chatbot. What you should be seeing here is a mostly white screen. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah, and it's the Brainy bot. Yeah.
Yeah, Brainy
Okay.
bot.
Okay.
Okay, and this is a simple little, what I did when I wrote the book, it got me really interested in a lot of the people who provide these, it's all very custom programming and it can get very expensive. And I thought, well, you know, in learning and development, we really need some of the same things over and over again. So I worked with a chatbot building company and I came up with 3 basic ones. And actually a guy read my book who happened to work for the United Nations. And this is the one that he bought. So he, of course, we did some customizing, but this is an example of how you might interact with that. So let's say, now let me see if I can get my, let's say I want to be called the all-powerful brain lady. I haven't actually tried this one. Let's see. There we go. Got it. The all-powerful brain lady. Here are some examples of messages I can send. And then it continues to educate me about itself, about what it can do. And there is, now that doesn't really go anywhere, but here's an email of a resource. Another way I can help you is to give you other things. And this is just a way to help new people. It can be overwhelming for people to go through training and not really, and get their systems up and their tools and so on. And then the more I work with this bot, the more information it gives me. Now that's just a brief example, and I'm back on my slide presentation now.
So we had a question, Margie, from Lawrence.
Yes.
He said, it seemed like in the screenshots he's referring to, we're seeing predetermined questioning. So does the tech, has it evolved to the point where we can use the open-ended questioning? Was his question?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Typically, you should start with a multiple choice to narrow things down.
Okay.
So that the bot knows it's working within a domain of knowledge. So for example, if you're recommending courses to someone, this is a really useful thing to do, kind of like a consultant, a learning consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, folks, I talk with my hands, and I know you can't see me because I turned my camera off, but I am going crazy with my hands. If you hear anything, that's probably what it is. So the consultant would start with, hi, what's your name if you've never been there before, or welcome back, Margie. What can I do for you today? And then it would give a few, these are the things I can do. And then from there, you can start to let people type in. So let's say that I picked leadership training. Might say, the bot might ask, is there something specific about leadership training that you're looking for? Now we have to have taught the bot to recognize keywords. So and this is called natural language processing. And so once you teach it that certain words mean certain things, like link to a possible course or indicate a specific need of a learner, now your bot can respond appropriately without having to make everything multiple choice. And the more people interact with it, you get a back-end report that tells you what keywords are coming up and how the bot responded and whether or not that's the response you wanted. So another key part, if you want to have that type of open entry field, is lots and lots of practice for your bot. You need to train it just like you would a human being. And you should do that with a group of people who are willing to, who know they're doing a pilot. you know, and who will accept crazy answers, because every once in a while you'll get one. And you also want to build in a default answer like, you know, I can't find that information right now. Can I get back to you? And then, you know, you capture an email and that goes to a human being who finds the information and then also updates the database for the bot. So the next time that question comes up or that specific keyword, it's more prepared to handle it. Did that answer that question?
Yes, that did, Margie. Thank you.
Okay. And
Yeah,
of course, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is Kathy again. Just a couple things that stimulates my thinking with, you know, is to emphasize what you just said, is that training has to go on, right? I think we're all training, you know, Google and Apple with our images to do their facial recognition. That's probably why they're free. But the other thing is, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, there is like open source software that is artificial intelligence that can do things like take some of your emails and analyze them to say, hey, do I sound defensive? Do I sound abrupt? Do I sound, you know, so just as an illustration that AI can evaluate natural language in that way to kind of assess it, you know, I would imagine that kind of capability is built into at least some bot technology, chatbot
yes,
technology.
absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
some of the bots, there's, you know, there are literally hundreds of companies that do this kind of thing, and an awful lot of them are marketing in focus. So they really are more intent on delivering specific information, and they basically focus on the multiple choice. The ones that are more as a teaching tool give you more flexibility. And so it's kind of like with any software that you use, it's as good as the programming behind it. And then you have to learn how to use it best. So that's why I recommend that if you're just getting started, it's worth getting a little guidance first before you buy anything, you know, so that you don't accidentally buy something that's not really going to work for you. And sometimes you can get trial memberships and those kind of things. So they're not all equal, I guess what I'm saying. Some chatbot programs are smarter than others, more efficient than others, easier to use than others. There's a trade-off there. Did that help, Kathy?
Yeah, thanks, Margie.
So here are the some of the things you can do today. I've tried to limit myself to just 5. If you're struggling to get engagement, I hear a lot of my clients saying, oh, you know, virtual training is great, but now that's about all people are getting and they're getting kind of burned out on it. We need a change of pace. Traditional e-learning, and I did an interview, I think Kathy's going to be sharing it with you guys, about how traditional e-learning has really, it's fallen a bit behind from what user expectations are based on their life in the digital world in terms of social media, and they're used to a more engaging, more flexible, more fluid connection with their technology than what we see in traditional e-learning, where you have to program everything that happens. And so what the chatbot does is it can actually surprise you. When we were working on that United Nations project, we thought one of the questions they might ask is, are you a real human being, or are you human, which is something people often do to see if they can break the chatbot. And we had not programmed an answer yet. And I was playing around with it, and this is the answer I got. I'm not. Does it matter? And I thought, what a brilliant answer. Because I'm here to help you. Does it really matter if I'm human or not? And that was something that just came up through the programming. It's not like it's a live, I'm not saying it's a live intelligent being in the way that we think of it, but the programming was good enough to piece together now, if I had not reacted well to that answer, it would have unlearned it. But I liked the answer and continued to react with it. And so that's now in its repertoire as one of those answers. So it can increase engagement, and it can and should sometimes surprise you and the learner, because it'll come up with something that maybe you wouldn't have connected. It can certainly answer questions is one of the simplest things. If you have an FAQ document, frequently asked questions, something like that, you can easily turn that into a bot that's just there to answer questions about your product or your training or something like that. And you can flip it and make it an assessment. You could have the chatbot ask the questions and tell the learner whether they got it right or not, point to further studies if they need more information, and make that a very unique and personalized experience instead of our traditional multiple choice assessment. You can also use a chatbot for reflective questioning because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of asking people. As a matter of fact, one of my clients is and I mentioned her in the book, is a coach, a performance coach. And she has a lot of these talks about, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, there's no right or wrong answer to that. Whatever the person says, you're going to pick up on that and you're going to say, tell me more. And how do you see yourself getting there? And what would be the first step you would take? Those are the kinds of things that can be programmed into a chatbot. So she can't be with her clients 24/7. So now she has this side service where they can get this automated coaching. So you can use that to help people think about diversity issues. Do you have any unconscious biases? As a matter of fact, this is where keywords might really help you, seeing somebody type in a text. So a lot of interesting things that are starting to go on there. It can recommend, I think I already mentioned, a learning consultant. And one of the great things is they don't have to stand alone. The one I showed you is just out on the internet on a site because we haven't loaded it yet. It will be on the learning management system and it'll be right on the front page. So as soon as someone comes to the learning management system, the chatbot comes up and says, hi, how can I help you? This can run on your intranet, on a company website, or inside a traditional e-learning course or on a virtual training. So if you have the code, you can integrate it just about anywhere. That's gotten easier and easier. So let me pause and see if anyone has any questions about those.
No,
Good.
I'm not seeing any questions yet.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah. Now, I separated this one because you even can use a chatbot to help people feel better. There is, in fact, a company, and I'm not promoting it per se, but it's done there's been a lot of great research with elderly patients of dementia. There's a lot of great research that pets are really great for them, but they're not necessarily so great for the pet. You know, you can understand why they might forget to feed them or take them out or take care of them as they should be. And so this company made this adorable puppy you see is a robot. And it behaves very much like an ordinary dog, except it doesn't need to be fed or walked, but if you want to walk it, it'll follow behind you and walk. And it learns its name. It turns its head when you talk to it. And it has learned the behaviors we expect from a dog. Not all of them, but you know, it's a pretty good facsimile. And this is a wonderful way for people to engage with artificial intelligence. We usually think of it as these cold, maybe a robot made of steel or a, you know, a system on a computer. There's a lot of great work being done in healthcare about how can a bot take a part of the responsibilities of caring for someone and just helping them with their mental health and just providing simple companionship. I'm not in that business, but I just love that example, and it shows you where some of the science is going. So what I'd like to ask you guys now is to think about, because all learning technologies are only good if they help you solve a problem. Is there a problem that you think you could solve? If you're not sure, you might want to go to this this link is a quick little assessment that's on my website, or I think this group is probably savvy enough that you can just put something in the chat right now and say, I think a chatbot might work this way in my organization. And let's see what we get in the chat.
Mm.
Okay, everybody.
Put your thinking
Come up with
caps on.
some problems to solve.
And maybe I should go back actually to this page,
Yeah.
so you can remember some of the ways you might want to use it.
Yeah. I have some thoughts of mine, but I give everybody a chance.
Let's let
here.
other people.
Oh, Yvonne's got a good one. Respond to member questions. Yvonne is president of ISBI International, so I bet that would change his life.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mila.
Lawrence, I think a chatbot would be able to engage learners who haven't used the LMS regularly and try to increase their usage by guiding them toward new learning content.
Helping them understand how to use it and how to find content on their own. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, Max could provide answers to FAQs about first principles of instruction. Max's baby there, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Another client of mine has technicians out in the field, and they use the chatbot. The chatbot can sense they are using a handheld device. There's software on it to check and see if the system, it happens to be telecommunications. So they're checking cables, they're checking signals, making sure connections are right. And the chatbot can sense if they are, clicking on the wrong things or just kind of paused, like they might be hesitating, and it will pop up and offer advice. And it can display step-by-step instructions if they need it. So you can also use it for just-in-time performance support, which is similar to that LMS solution, but applied to different kinds of things.
I kind of have a weird one. I'm not going to type it, but I've heard of situations where somebody was a star performer. I'm going to say Todd Watson, to bring in the Watson theme there. And they said, we want all these people on this particular job role to be like Todd Watson. So, is it a way that the chatbot could, be taught, his qualities and things he's interested in perhaps, and things like that, and then start suggesting things to people in the job role that they want to bring up to that person's standard, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Like, let's say he's a top salesperson.
Yeah.
And so maybe your training program is, what would Todd do?
Yeah. Okay.
And you can ask, and you can go, hey, Todd, I just got this objection and I don't know how to handle it. Or this customer hasn't called me back. How many times am I supposed to keep trying? And, after quite a few hours of working with the real Todd and interviewing him about, because sometimes these really wonderful exemplars who are great at what they do, and we would love to clone them, they can't tell you what they do. That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to find those patterns. You have to help them bring that out. Then you can program that into the bot responses. And you might also have a list of questions new people usually ask, or areas they struggle with, and you might talk to managers. So it would be a process of getting this, but I could definitely see where that would be a fun one, and people would probably love engaging with that. It's kind of like having a mentor who's with you 24/7. So,
yeah.
You can brush up on anything you need before or after an engagement with the customer, and you could use that for leadership or customer service or any other, or even technical skills for any kind of learning domain.
So there's another couple of questions here, Margie. Let's see, from Vince, could an AI bot help solve the emotional alienation created by other less effective AI bots?
Yeah, I think we want to be careful with the word solve, for as though one technology intervention truly solves any complex problem. It helps to solve it. But you know, there's an interesting experiment going on right now where two chatbots are talking to each other, and they have developed their own language. So now the researchers aren't really quite sure what they're talking about. So I babysat for twins back when I was a teenager, and they did the same thing. They had created their own language, and they knew that nobody else could understand them. They were doing that on purpose. So, and they love to, you know, change each other's clothes, and their poor mother, you know, trying to keep them apart. So there's some really interesting things, but in terms of, but I'm glad you brought up, it is possible to have a less effective bot. I won't say a bad bot, but you know, and the early ones certainly were. They were too rigid. They didn't have a wide enough range of ways to understand you and communicate with you. And that's where that natural language processing has gotten so much better. There's also something called intent, and that's something that some platforms are better with than others, and that is understanding what the user is intending by a question that might not have been typed right, might not have been worded correctly, and responding, you know, with what was intended rather than literally what has been entered.
Margie, another question we have here is, how long do you usually need to train the chatbot before you're deploying it? That, you know, you talked about focus groups or not, or a test group, beta groups, I should say, but clearly that's kind of the end of the development stage. How much time do we need to plan on to
you know,
to train this thing?
It is very difficult to give a blanket answer because it depends on what you want it to do. But I'll give you an example of the simple, pretty simple project we're doing for the United Nations, where we have a set amount of information. It's everything that's in their LMS. We have a set group of users, which is about 5,000 volunteers. And so that entire project, it's almost done. We've been working on it for 6 months.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Give you a rough idea.
Yeah.
And we're at about the time at our usual stopping time. So some people may be dropping, but I think Margie, you said you were willing to continue a little bit longer. So people may drop, but if you would like to continue, we can do that.
Yeah, and I just want to get to one thing before you guys drop, because it's very important to let you know that if you are not an ISPI Southern California member yet, you might want to become one if you'd like to come to our Build Your First Chatbot workshop, October 16th. So I want to make sure I got that in and encourage everybody to spend some time reflecting on this afterwards, because your brain needs time to process. And we're going to send this deck to you. It has some links in there with some great resources. And I will stay for any more questions.
That's great. Thank you. You know, I'm just reeling with some ideas of how I could use this or could have used it. You know, your last example of a technician in the field, that really rings true with me, where we train technicians to repair cars and motorcycles, and they don't practice the skill for several months because it's an infrequent repair. And particularly with the handheld diagnostic tool, I could see this being built into it to literally coach the user when they've come to that point where they can't remember the next step, and you know, Siri or Jill or whoever we want to call this bot asks the question of what are you thinking now? Or, you know, I could just see it helping people in so many different ways in the technical fields, and then from there it just kind of mushrooms into a lot of other fields as well. But do you see that happening?
I do, and I think that there are so many, for example, new software. Now, the first
Yeah.
few times you use it, you need that coach over your shoulder. And eventually
Yeah.
you may
Yeah.
you may be fine with it, or it could be software that you just use once a month. You know, the managers in particular end up with, I have to do payroll, I have to do performance reviews or something. They don't do that often, but it involves software, and it's really critical that they get it right.
Yeah.
That's one of the great frustrations of being a manager. That would be a perfect use of this kind of coach.
Especially if there's someone coming in new to a management position and needing to learn the organizational way of doing things. Yeah, I could see this being a real angel on your shoulder, you know, in terms of
Yes, that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
getting it right and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating stuff.
I'm going to ask about the devil on the shoulder, Margie, because you're not just familiar with the technology. You talk about, you know, how the human side of it, right, and how we respond to it and use it, and these are creatures of our, you know, that we've created as human beings. So how do we make sure that we don't build in biases? Does the software help us do that, or is that something we have to pay attention to as we build things?
I am so glad you brought that up, Kathy. I didn't put it on my history of AI because it's kind of a negative event, but some of you may have heard of the um, social media bot that, and they're still out there, but one was done as a scientific experiment to see if they could in fact pass the Turing test, if people would think they were engaging with a real, and they made it a teenage girl on Facebook. And the way they taught the bot was that they had it survey all the comments on Facebook within a given period of time. So within hours, this bot became a raging homophobe and racist of all kinds, and they had to take it down. It was, but it
Wow.
proved an interesting point is that it's just like our children. They learn from us. Another case was they were trying, in fact, to eliminate unconscious bias in selecting resumes of people to interview, thinking that perhaps male names, it was a technical company, and maybe male names were coming up more often, not because they were more qualified, but because of an unconscious bias. So what they did is they took the resumes of all the people they had hired, and I think you'll hear the flaw in this logic, to train the bot and look for these characteristics. Well, now they didn't use the names, but there are still, for example, males are more likely to be involved in team sports. Now that's a generalization, that's not always true, but there are certain behaviors that were considered very attractive that were going to point you to males. And so you have to be, a bot can be, an algorithm can be just as unconsciously biased as the humans who built it. And so one of the things you do early on in testing is see what kind of results you get. See if in fact there is, now with the kinds of things we're talking about in learning and development, the examples of helping support someone, your chances of getting unconscious bias are probably pretty slim. But if you're more leaning more on the HR end and you want to use this to recruit new employees or to do kind of a preliminary interview, you need to be very careful and really test it thoroughly. And there's some, certainly you would never want to have someone's performance review, not at the state that the technology is at right now. So definitely there are a few places, and you asked me that earlier, there are a few places where it might not be wise, that those would be one of, you know, one of the things I'd be very, very careful, make sure it was really carefully vetted first.
Margie, your audio kind of went down a little bit there.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Is
you.
this better? Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you hear
Margie?
my last answer, or was it just, you know, like
No, I heard
a
it. It's okay.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Margie,
Yes.
I got a question for you. This is Ara Norwood from Child Care Resource Center. Are you at all familiar with the work of Peter Diamandis?
Yes.
Price, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he talked in his most recent book, The Future is Faster Than You Think, about the notion of convergence. And you mentioned convergence early on, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, he looks at these various other technologies that are coming down the pike, such as, you know, augmented reality and blockchain and sensors and robotics and all sorts of other things. And I'm kind of, and yeah, I guess, and you know, 3D printing and things of that sort. And I guess what I'm kind of wondering is, do you know if there's been much research done up to this point on what kinds of startling surprises may come out of mixing AI with some other kinds of emerging technologies?
Like augmented reality, for example,
Yeah.
you know, and let the
Yeah.
AI create an artificial world, or a lot of the healthcare. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of convergence right now with healthcare and AI.
Wow.
There's a lot of great research. The challenge is narrowing it down. So you know what? And I'll make this offer to everybody. If anyone has something really, you know, something intriguing, something, because of course we can't give you everything that you need in a webinar like this. You know, yeah, send me that question and I'll be glad to run it down for you. You know, I get a lot of peer-reviewed journals. I talk to actual neuroscientists and AI developers. So, you know, I can maybe find you a few interesting things, sort through it, kind of be your human
A chatbot.
con-
Yeah.
Yeah, my
chatbot
human
and
bot,
see what
sure.
you find.
Um,
Yeah.
Margie, I
Thank
want
you.
to add one question here from Lawrence. You bring up an interesting point about data sets. Are there any data sets out there that you could recommend to teach a chatbot?
There are data sets that you can buy.
Okay.
Depending on what you wanted to do will affect what data set you buy. So send me an email and I can see if I can point you in the right direction.
Great.
And
Okay.
Margie did put her email in the chat, and
It is.
in
It's there. Yeah.
it's in the announcements and all that on our website. And all
Yeah,
that.
and it'll be on the slides.
Yep.
Also, I'm happy to connect with you guys on LinkedIn. We all know each other now, so let's do that.
Yeah. Folks, we are rapidly approaching 1 p.m. All good things have to come to an end, including this interesting meeting. I am still reeling from some of the things that you're making me think about that we could do. For those of you that want to grab that email address for Margie in chat, you can save chat by clicking on the 3 dots beside at the bottom of that window. And with that, I'm going to just stop our recording. Yeah.